Welcome to the Probate Nation. Our show today focuses on the process of selling real estate, either in an estate or in a guardianship of property. After all the tangible personal property has been removed from the property, often the real estate under your control as a personal representative or a guardian of property is in need of a number of repairs and improvements. But what should you do to maximize the sales price and get the property sold sooner rather than later? It's a good question which our guest tonight will address, along with a host of other suggestions she encourages you to keep in mind when selling real estate in Maryland. With me today is Terry Westerlund, an associate broker with LaRave Real Estate in Howard County, Maryland. Terry was born in Washington, D.C., raised and attended school in Silver Spring, and settled in Clarksville, Maryland. She obtained her Maryland real estate license in 1999 and opened her own brokerage in 2008. Since that time, 3 of her 4 children have joined her team. Welcome and thank you, Terry, for joining us today to talk a little bit about how we're going to sell real estate out of an estate or a guardianship of property.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So I guess one of the first questions that comes up is who actually can sign the listing agreement, who can actually sign the deed to convey the property? And I know you're not an attorney, so I won't ask you to answer that question, but I think that's important for folks to know that we need to have a duly appointed, in Maryland it's called a personal representative if it's in an estate. And if it's a guardianship of property where someone's living, that person needs to have a court order that gives them the necessary powers to go ahead and do that, whether it's sign the contract or to sign the deed. So that's important for folks to keep in mind, that we have to make sure that whoever's dealing with the property has the proper authority. So it's important that you talk with the lawyer who might be assisting you. But once we get past that, let's talk about, someone's a personal representative in an estate. They come to you and they want to sell a piece of property, or someone's a guardian of property for someone who's incapacitated. What are the initial steps you ask folks to do?
Well, preparing the house for the market is very important. So taking the time and learning the process is paramount. We may also need a death certificate, provided to prove that that person is representing that person.
Okay. And of course, I guess one of the things, if someone has passed away, we do want to generally start with a date of death appraisal of the property to make sure we have a fair market value to establish this new tax basis.
Exactly. The date of death appraisal is very important. As far as the tax assessment goes, that's changing every 3 years to keep up with market conditions. Mm-hmm. But the date of death appraisal is the value at a certain point in time.
Sure.
The date of death, exactly what it is.
Of course. But let's talk about that. So no one's in every situation, whether someone's incapacitated and we have a guardian of property, or whether someone has passed away. Tell me what the realtor market analysis does. What's that? How important is that?
It's one of the most important pieces. It's so important you might even want to obtain 2 of them. So interviewing a couple of agents and really analyzing the price is paramount. Those 2 analyses should be within 5% of each other. If they're not, you might want to get a third opinion. Mm-hmm. If the property isn't priced accurately, then you'll just sit on the market and you chase it down. The goal is really to get it priced right, because that will achieve the highest net proceeds.
Okay. So let's talk about the next thing. Again, we're in the initial steps. How important is it to get the property cleaned out?
Well, it really depends on the property and the situation. If the heirs don't live around the house, if they're in a different area, it might be hard for them to do all the logistics. So being helpful as far as running interference or helping them, find the resources to take care of that is important. It really should show well. So if the furniture is older, you might want to take it out because it makes the home feel older. It is very competitive out there, so preparing in advance is important.
Okay, so it is important to assess. Now talk about home inspection. We often see home inspections done as part of the buying process, but how important is it to have a home inspection done even before you put the property on the market?
Again, it depends on the situation. That would be called a pre-inspection. Mm-hmm. So if you do the pre-inspection, that will let you know if there's any safety concerns or anything major. Anything that's in that inspection, you're going to have to disclose. So if you receive the inspection report and there's a few safety items that you want to eliminate, go ahead and do that. Then you might want to have the inspector come back, verify that it's been done, update the report, because you do have to disclose everything on that report to the potential buyers.
So if it's been fixed, do you have to disclose that it was a problem, it's been fixed, or or is there no disclosure requirement?
You do not need to disclose. Let's take radon, for instance. If you knew that the home has radon, you have to disclose. If you mitigate, then it's mitigated. The problem has gone away and you don't need to disclose.
I see. So, it is a judgment as to whether or not you do the home inspection to start with. Okay.
Yes, but the nice thing is, you know you're not going to have any problems on the back end. You've made the buyer aware of what it is you're conveying.
That's a good point. Well, let's sort of switch gears now as we get into the actual property itself and talk about the types of repairs and improvements that maybe should be considered or not considered. What does the typical buyer look for in a home to buy?
Price, location, condition, cleanliness, could be schools, upgrades, improvements. They're really looking for everything at this time.
Okay. So let's talk then about the importance of then assessing the home the property will compete against. Okay, so we know talk a little bit about that.
You're definitely competing. So one of two things is going to happen when you're preparing a home. You're either going to help other people sell, or you're going to utilize the competition to help you sell. So when you think of it in that light, just getting prepared to be the best in your field will help you get into the under contract.
Okay, so it's important to assess your competition and make sure you look good compared to them.
Yes, we don't want to help them.
That's a very good point. So we talk about the importance of reviewing the property in light of what the buyer is looking for and what the competing properties are that are out there. So should all of the deficiencies that have been identified in the home inspection or in your realtor assessment, should those all be fixed, taken care of?
It might not be an option. If there's no money, no time, you have to work within a budget. So it's really important to prioritize what's most important. And if you come up with 10 things as an agent, maybe you might only be able to do 3 or 4. You do the best that you can within reason. Same with the home inspection. Again, safety concerns are first. Eliminate as many objections as you can.
Sure. Okay. Okay, let's talk then. So we have some things that we know we want to get taken care of. Who should do the work? Okay, should it be done by the property owner and do a handyman special, or should they hire somebody to do the work?
They should always have a licensed professional. Number one, it removes liability. So if something should go wrong after the sale, they're looking for that vendor to get the receipt, a paid receipt once the work is complete with a detailed explanation of what was done is the best way to do it, and then give that buyer the receipt. That way they're calling that person and not you.
Okay, very good point. Very good point. And I guess that same thing applies in the case of work that the realtor might have identified to be done. Those, you think you take the same approach with that? Absolutely.
Always licensed professionals. You want to remove the liability. And the agent should have many resources and be able to help you find good help.
Good help and at reasonable prices.
Exactly.
That's, I guess, the key thing. Let's talk a little bit about we have this property, we've cleaned it up, we've identified some problems that needed to be fixed. We fixed those that make sense, that fit within our budget. We're now at that stage where we need to begin to take a look at how the property is going to be viewed by people who would come to see it and decide if there's anything else we need to do to tweak it in order to make it look great in comparison to its competition. So one of the things that we hear people doing now is called staging the property. So tell me what staging the property, what is that?
Well, it's exactly what it sounds like. You're setting the stage for the buyer to come into the home and make it feel like it's theirs. You don't want to have personal items in there or they'll feel like they're in someone else's home. It also gets them off task. If there's diplomas on the wall, they're now interested in where you went to school, or if there's a collection, they're looking at that instead of figuring out where their furniture is going to fit best. It really helps keep them on task.
Okay.
It creates flow also. Decluttering and depersonalizing is very important.
Okay, so that's really why that stage in the property is necessary, is to kind of keep the prospective buyer, focused on the property itself and how they could live there.
Yes.
And not get distracted, as you said. So who typically makes the arrangements to have the property staged?
Usually it would be the agent. They should have resources that they can either provide for you or set up themselves.
Now, I've heard some realtors actually have their own furniture and stuff like that they actually then draw from to stage property. Is that something that you see a lot these days, or is that unusual?
It is becoming more popular.
Okay. So talk a little bit about the cost. I mean, because certainly this is not being done for free.
No.
How do we go about, tell me what the cost might be to stage a property?
The range is huge.
Is it really?
It can be as little as a few $100s up into the thousands. It depends on what you're going to do. If the home is already furnished, having a stager come in, that person will walk through with you room to room and tell you how to make the room look the best on the internet. That's the most important thing, because that's where the buyers, of course, are starting. If the home is vacant and they want to bring the furniture in, that's where it can get very pricey. Sometimes the seller will just choose to do a few rooms, like the kitchen, the family room, of course the master suite. Those two rooms, besides the family room, are the most important.
So that was one of my questions that I wanted to follow up. So the rooms to focus on, if we are going to focus on rooms, is going to be kitchen, family room, and master bedroom?
Yes. The master suite and kitchen are first.
Okay. Okay. And are those also the rooms that you would focus on as far as any improvements or cleanup work might need to be done?
I would say yes. Those two definitely come first. And just little things like updating knobs, light fixtures, faucets. You can get a lot of bang for your buck and really help the buyer feel they're in a newer home.
That's very interesting. Do people paint their houses a lot of time, the whole house?
Some do. And sometimes we will recommend, if the doors, because we want to keep the price down as far as what we're spending. There's a budget. So if the ceilings look good and the doors, the trim, we might just do the walls. But again, if you're looking on the internet, bright colors, it's so distracting. So to neutralize is really the best thing to do.
So the internet is really, at the end of the day, when we get finished with doing the improvements and the stage, and we're really doing that for purposes of actually marketing on the internet. Before they even walk through the door, most of them are shopping on the internet?
Yes, you only have one chance to make a first impression. You want to keep them on that page. So even as far as the flow of the photos, sometimes you think the foyer, then the living room, dining room would be a normal progression. But I think putting your best photos first, that will help keep them on the page and show off the best features of that home. It might even be the backyard. So not always is it making sense to go in a normal progression.
As if you're walking in the front door.
Yes.
I gotcha. Okay. Well, let's talk about, now we've got the property, we've cleaned up things we need to clean up. We've done whatever staging makes sense in the professional opinion of the realtor who's helping the property owner. So now we need to go ahead and get the property ready to be presented and listed. So when is a for sale sign typically put up in the yard?
I would say recently, in the last 2 to 3 years, there's something called the coming soon status.
I do recall seeing that in my neighborhood, matter of fact.
It's wonderful. If the seller is not quite ready yet, you can put the sign with the coming soon rider in the yard up to 3 weeks before it becomes active. And what's nice about that is, if the buyer happens to be out at that point, they're at least going to know that you're coming. It will notify the agent. It's online with the multiple list, but it does not populate to other sites. And the house cannot be shown during this status.
Now, when you say it's online, does that mean that other agents can see that it's coming?
Definitely.
Or they'll see details about it?
It's on the multiple list. As many details as that agent put in at that moment. Once it goes live, live, generally there's more information, but at least you know what's coming.
Okay. And is price normally disclosed at that point?
It has to be.
It has to be. Okay, well, that's helpful. That's very helpful. So when is the listing of the property actually made active?
Once everything's ready, the seller's done everything that they can, the agent has prepared all of the marketing, then you're ready to go live. And the thing is, once that happens, it's like, now what? So the best thing to do is put a deadline on it. Put 2 to 3 weeks or 5 to 7 showings, whichever comes first. If 3 weeks go by and you haven't had a showing or anything, you want to have the agent check the market. Is it nothing's happening? Then it's really just the market. If you have 5 to 7 showings in the first week, why don't you have an offer? It's very important to get that feedback, find out what it is. Only one of 2 things keeps a house from selling. It's either price or condition. So obtaining that feedback, it will let you know which one it defaults to and how you can move forward and keep yourself positioned well.
Okay. So I think the next thing is just in this sort of presenting a listing, of course, is the listing price itself. So tell me how you get to a listing price from the time you first get to when we actually get ready to turn it on in multiple listings. How do you get to a listing price?
The market analysis. It's not something, this is not something you do at the last minute. You put a lot of thought into this pricing when you're first coming out of the gate and you're interviewing the agent and you're determining the value with what's happening in the marketplace.
Okay.
And again, they should be close in their price. If not, then go ahead and get another opinion. You might want to check at the last minute to make sure another home didn't just come on. That's really going to cause some competition.
Okay.
But it's not a last minute thing.
Okay. Now, there's a thing I see a lot of times. I just saw it on a seller's disclosure statement just the other day. But we see more and more of these things called seller concessions that show up in the process of actually getting into a contract and selling the property. What are seller concessions and what is that about?
There's 2 different things. If it's a first-time home buyer, they might need some closing help at the table. So they might ask for a certain amount. You have to make sure, though, that you've checked with the lender because there's guidelines and a concession is capped. So you don't want to find out later they can't get that much of a concession and now they're having trouble with the loan. When you're thinking about that, though, you want to make sure that the price isn't so high in order to provide the concession that it now doesn't appraise. So you have to be careful of that. That would be one type of concession. Another concession would be, say, if the family, again, is out of town, they don't have time to make these repairs at home inspection time, they might go ahead and offer a concession at settlement so then the buyer can do that repair afterwards.
Okay, and that's different. That's a different type of concession from the first one.
Yes, one would just be closing help, and then the other one's for repair. Regardless, you want to make sure that the lender knows this.
Okay, good point. Well, let's turn to some lessons learned and kind of draw on some of the experiences you've had. So, is all of this really necessary in order to sell Mom's house when Mom passes away?
It really is, especially if you want to maximize the net. So just making sure that you're working with someone who can help you, guide you through this process, is really worth taking the time because we want the most money for you. So,
of course, of course. Now, again, drawing on your lessons learned, I wonder if you could share with our viewers some of the lessons you've learned over the years, sometimes the hard way, as we all do, and as we do our business. In the course of selling residential real estate, things you've learned that you would pass along to prospective sellers of real estate in Maryland.
I would say trust and communication is very important because sellers don't move every day. So they don't understand what the entire process is, and it has become more complicated. So making sure that you let them know it's not always easy. You are going to have some bumps and bruises along the way, but keep your eye on the goal. Don't get distracted by the little things that don't seem little at that time. And when we're compounded by a death or divorce, it's really a difficult time. So having a little, not just a little bit, but definitely having empathy and just being a good listener and helping them through. And again, keeping the eye on the goal so they can get to the next phase in their life.
So it's important for them to make sure they understand the real estate agent is actually someone they can lean on to help guide them through this process, because they've been through this process before.
Yes, and even knowing these are words in their paper. It's just a ways and a means to get you to settlement. So don't take it too personally.
Sure, that makes sense. Well, we've covered a lot of stuff, in the show so far, but I wanted to go ahead and give you an opportunity to draw on some of the things you may have touched on, maybe expand a little bit, things you want to pass on to our viewers who, they might be selling mom's house because mom has passed away, or that maybe they're a guardian of the property of mom, and now they've got to go ahead and sell that house to get some money so they can put mom in a nursing home or assisted living. Some final comments, suggestions you want to pass along to our viewers?
Well, I would say if it is someone that you have to help that's out of the area, you may want to go ahead and go online, look at real estate in that area, and pick 2 or 3 brokerages that seem to be doing well. Then call that manager and tell them what the situation is and ask them for their referral. That way you know that you're getting someone experienced and that has been through this before with other clients and knows how to make things as easy as possible.
Okay.
Especially when it's long distance, it just becomes more difficult.
Sure. Do you see a lot of that? A lot of people long distance trying to sell property?
Not too often, but it does happen.
Okay. Anything else you want to pass along to our viewers?
No, just that I appreciate you having me, and I hope it was helpful.
Well, thank you very much. I wanted to say it's great that you're taking the time to come and visit with us to share all this really, really valuable information, and to help the viewers of the Probate Nation over in Maryland, okay, who may have a need to sell real estate. At least they have an idea about things to expect and what to do. So again, thank you so very much.
Well, I appreciate what you do. I went ahead and looked at your website, and there's so much good information.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, it's all because of our guest. Selling real estate, whether in an estate or in a guardianship of the property, presents a host of challenges if you want to maximize the sales price and not be left holding and maintaining property for months on end. Our guest tonight shined a light on things to do and not to do as you undertake this task. What I take away from the discussion, however, is that it is critical to make sure you spend the right amount of money on improvements and repairs that are necessary and will serve to enhance the value of the property. But more importantly, how you present the property to prospective buyers, how you price it, can go a long way to getting the property sold in a timely manner for a good price. We strongly recommend to personal representatives and guardians of property that all this is best accomplished with the advice and guidance of a good realtor. This concludes our show this evening. We hope you found it informative. Replays of this show and all shows to date, along with helpful information, are available on the Probate Nation website. We encourage you to take advantage of this public service resource. On behalf of the Probate Nation, thank you for visiting with us.